Last week, in the early hours of Wednesday morning, a SWAT team descended on a quiet residential street in the Edgewood neighborhood of Atlanta. This is what it looked like. The scene, heavily armed members of the Atlanta Police Department. You see them, guns drawn there as they come out in a joint operation with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, that's a state law enforcement agency, raided a house and arrested 3 people in it. Now, if you're looking at that footage, it looked like something you might see for the takedown of a gang leader or a cartel drug bust. In fact, the people inside that house were organizing legal support and a bail fund for people protesting a very controversial police training facility that opponents have dubbed Cop City. The 3 members of a group called the Atlanta Solidarity Fund were charged with money laundering and charity fraud. You don't see a ton of SWAT raids for charity fraud. Now, the plan for Cop City was first officially proposed back in 2021 as an 85-acre public safety training campus, complete with a mock convenience store, home, and nightclub. The building site is a former prison farm just outside Atlanta, surrounded by a forest. Initially, officials said taxpayers would pay only about 1/3 of the total $90 million cost, to the tune of $31 million. Last month, however, they announced the costs to public will more than double, thanks to a provision in the city's lease with the Atlanta Police Foundation that will add about another $36 million to the public cost. The plan set off spirited resistance that's been going strong for nearly 2 years now. In fact, protesters moved into the forest to kind of occupy it in an effort to stop construction. And we've seen violent clashes between those protesters and police, including, most notably, the fatal shooting of a 26-year-old environmental activist in January who was in the forest. A Georgia state trooper was also injured in that incident. Now, at the time, police accused that activist, who went by the nickname Tortuguita, of firing on state troopers without warning. Subsequent evidence makes that appear less likely. In fact, an autopsy commissioned by the activist's family showed that Tortuguita's hands were raised when they were shot by troopers. The crackdown on the resistance to Cop City continued, with the arrest of a legal observer and attorney from the Southern Poverty Law Center at a demonstration in March. And he is one of more than 40 people charged with domestic terrorism in connection with the protests, who were accused of participating in what police have called violent attacks. In the face of all this opposition, state officials, from Republican Governor Brian Kemp to the Democratic city governance of Atlanta, seem almost monomaniacally fixated on building Cop City. This week, the long fight culminated with a marathon 16-hour meeting of the Atlanta City Council and a 5:30 a.m. vote finally approving funding for the facility. More than 300 people stepped up to speak ahead of that vote, the vast majority of them registering their strong opposition to the plan.
Building a mock city for police officers to practice defense tactics, use militarized equipment, and destroy forest land that's crucial to combat the effects of climate change is not only harmful, it's anti-Black, it's reinforcing white supremacist tactics, and it's tone deaf.
The police treatment of Tortuguita and the Atlanta Solidarity Fund and other activists confirms that the Atlanta police should not be rewarded with their own amusement park.
If you want to protect the people of Atlanta, invest in affordable housing, community food programs, and other emergency financial assistance, not in Cop City.
Now, the context here is important, right? This comes in this broader context of a national conversation about violence and policing over the past few years, right? In 2020, we watched civil rights protests, perhaps the largest in American history, spread across the country after the videotaped police killing of George Floyd. That same year, the rate of violent crime began to spike, with the murder rate jumping up nearly 30%. Now, however, after the plans for Cop City have been initiated, it seems the spike in violence may have had a lot more to do with the massive disruption of all aspects of social life of the pandemic and its aftermath. Violent crime is rapidly on the decline now. Look at this headline. It's a great, encouraging headline. In Atlanta, the city where this is being done, homicides are down more than 50% so far this year. I think it's fair to say that it's just not clear if a $90 million police training facility is the wisest use of Atlanta's taxpayer dollars, even from a public safety perspective, given that headline. Despite the overwhelming vote of the city council, opponents of Cop City are not giving up yet. Today, activists announced a plan to force a referendum vote on the project. And I'll say this, If the people who are so dead set on this project really think it's great on the merits, I would imagine they would welcome a citywide referendum to make their case and give it a real mandate, so that Atlantans may actually get a say after all.